Good evening, my friends. This is Paul again, and on my next top 10 list, I decided to take a look at the top 10 unintentional, yes, the question mark was placed in there on purpose, the top 10 unintentional Catholic teachings in Nintendo video games. Because, let's be honest, most video games are far from Catholic. Most of them either just want to have a good time, or they want to badmouth religion altogether. But I happen to have found 10 examples that are, for once, not quite so far-fetched. They actually have a surprising amount in harmony with Catholic teaching, or at least if they are teaching from another religion, then that religion had some kind of influence on Catholic teaching. So as usual, I'm going to rate them from the least credible to the most credible, because by the time you get down to number 1, it's actually blatantly obvious, and you have to be trying to avoid it to not see it. So number 10 is the over there and underwear in Super Paper Mario. Now, granted, I never actually played that game all the way through, so this is all hearsay, but my best friend did. And he told me there's this chapter in this game where everyone who gets in a game over goes to the underwear. Like, not underwear as in, like, briefs, but underwear as in, like, underwear? Like, W-H-E-R-E. And it's like the video game version of hell. But then those who beat video games are taken to the over there, which is like heaven. And everyone there speaks like how they do in the King James Bible. And the only reason why it's number 10 on this list is because I haven't seen it for myself. But I just thought that was a nice little homage to, like, heaven and hell in a Mario game of all things. So next we have the New Galaxy in Super Mario Galaxy. Now, Mario Galaxy is known for many things. Story, not one of them. Although I guess Rosalina's storybook kinda counts. But near the end of the game has a surprisingly shocking ending that I don't think anyone saw coming in a Mario game. And that is, spoiler alert, everyone dies. Like, no joke. Mario literally has a near-death experience at the end of the game, where everyone gets sucked into a black hole, and there's this giant, towering Rosalina saying, "Do you hear all the cries of the newborns? It is because when a Luma dies, it becomes a new galaxy." And she said, and you'll notice that the cycle of life never repeats itself twice. And so, when Mario finally wakes up, he realizes that everything is peaceful and beautiful, and as it was, and he and Bowser, even though it's not explicitly stated, it looks like he and Bowser and Peach are all friends now. And so Mario raises his hands to the heaven, and he says, "Welcome! Welcome, new galaxy!" Or if you're playing as Luigi, he would say, like, "Welcome, new galaxy!" So it's implying that they died, and they went to a form of heaven. Now, granted, that's a little bit flawed in theology, because, you know, if Bowser truly was evil, he might have to at least go through purgatory, but suffice to say that the whole, like, slaughter of the innocents, and that the innocents are rewarded with entire new galaxies, that says a lot on an anti-abortion level, if you think about it. So next, number 8, we have the Soul Frappe from Icarus Uprising. Now, that's a game that doesn't take itself very seriously, hence why this is so low on the list. But one thing that the game does seem to at least try to take seriously is their portrayal of Greek religion. And near the very end of the game, it's revealed that the mastermind, I won't even bother spoiling it, because that's something that I think should be obvious if you know Greek mythology, but it turns out that the mastermind is basically preventing souls from being able to move on. That they're essentially, like, he's taking a departed person's soul and using it to recreate something else. You could say it's almost like a perverted seance, which is expressly forbidden in the Catholic faith. And not only is it forbidden, but it's also disgusting. Like, the whole, like, Medusa is resurrected seems kind of ridiculous at first, but then you find out that it was only because a bunch of souls were put together to create her in the first place. You wonder why even she's irked about it. Is essentially, the villain is like an anti-purgatory type of villain, and for that, he's among Nintendo's more dastardly villains. Because at least most of them, like, kill you and then you're done with it, but someone that tries to torture you after death, that's pretty darn bad. And why I'm putting this on the list of Catholic teachings? Well, the heroes, like, all band together, even pits enemies to fight the mastermind, so that's pretty impressive. Number 7, D moves on from a little underrated DS game called Trace Memory. Now, the whole premise of Trace Memory revolves around a 13-year-old girl named Ashley, who, conveniently, has the same birthday as I do. How awesome is that? And she decides that she wants to go looking for her cousin Jessica, who went on a vacation or something to Blood Edward Island but never returned. And while Ashley is exploring the island, she runs into this boy who is a ghost, and he doesn't remember anything except that his name is D. And Ashley apparently is the only person on the island that can see him. And so he agrees to keep Ashley company if Ashley will help him to regain his lost memories of his childhood and eventually figure out how he died in the first place. Now, the game has 2 endings. In one ending, D doesn't have enough memories to remember who he is, and then he just simply says, oh well, guess I'll just stay on the island for another 50 years until I figure it out. But then in the true ending, D knows who he is, and then he's able to say goodbye to Ashley before he, like, ascends. And in essence, even though the Catholic Church is relatively vague on the teaching of purgatory, except that it actually exists, and it's a place where we're purged from all of our venial sins that were unconfessed, so that we're perfect going into heaven. Essentially, you could say this game is an unintentional mirror to that, because D needs to have a complete understanding of his life before he's able to just accept it and literally move on to a better life, rather than having lingering regrets. So, next on the list, we have number 5, and that is shifting in Virtue's Last Reward, or jumping, whatever you want to call it. But essentially, Virtue's Last Reward introduced the flow chart. Now, admittedly, at first, it was designed because people complained that its prequel, 999, didn't let you skip the puzzles, and the flow chart does let you do that. But it also gives us a look at the omnipotent nature of God. Because, you see, God, he reveals himself as I am to Moses on the mountain. And I am is a present tense form of speaking. So therefore, from the player's perspective, they're seeing this huge, complicated chart of, like, every single decision and, like, the outcomes to that, that's essentially how God thinks. And the game is giving you an opportunity to think like God. And that's all I'm going to say, because Virtue's Last Reward kind of is one of those games that, like, the best joy of it is knowing the story, but yeah, that's a pretty mind-blowing twist, if I do say so myself. Number 4, and this is where things get really intense. Like, you really have to be as stubborn as a mule not to see the Catholic teachings in these. Next, number 4, we have petitioning for the dead in Fire Emblem Fates. As if you thought Fire Emblem was not religious-based. This one is just like a major slap in the face to anyone who says otherwise. So, you know how Fire Emblem Fates has essentially 3 endings? Well, 2 that I can remember, in Birthright and Conquest. I'm sort of drawing a blank on Revelation. But in Birthright and Conquest, there's a scene where the main character gets knocked out by the final boss and essentially ends up in a state of being where she's talking with loved ones that she has lost. I say she because I always have my main character be a girl, because it reminds me of a girl in my novel, but you can choose to be a guy if you want to. And so the characters, like, encourage her and say, you can do it, you can save the world, we're rooting on you, we're praying for you, essentially reminding her that they're like the communion of saints. And we believe that when a person dies, they don't die, they go to a better reality, and they're still watching over us and rejoicing with our every decision. And they can support us. In fact, I know firsthand that when my grandpa was about to die, he was able to see his loved ones smiling at him. And I've heard that that's a very common thing when people are about to die. Now, in this character's case, she comes back to life, of course, but the fact is she had a near-death experience, which is consistent not only with Catholic teaching, but even with Christian teaching, sometimes even with atheist teaching. Like, near-death experiences are a thing. Look them up. But next we have yet another example from the Fire Emblem series, and that is the Baptism of Fire. I kid you not, that is exactly what it's called in the game. So in order for one of the main characters in Awakening, notice how I don't really like using spoilers that much. One of the main characters for the game is trying to defeat like the ultimate villain at the end of the game, but his sword is too weak to do that. So in order to do so, they have to ascend to the mountain of the Divine Dragon, and there he has to be purged by the Divine Fire, or, as they word it in the game, be baptized by it. And with that baptized fire, his sword is able to put the dragon to slumber, which is a perfect analogy of our baptism. You know, in the Gospel of John, John says, well, actually I don't remember which Gospel, but in one of the Gospels, John the Baptist said, I baptize you with water, but the one who comes ahead of me will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. So in other words, baptism is a sacrament that removes original sin, but it doesn't entirely take away your ability to sin. Hence why the character, if he does strike the dragon last, it only puts the dragon in slumber. But if the main character sacrifices himself or herself, then that brings an end to the dragon for good. And that is essentially the power of Jesus Christ's resurrection. He has the power to defeat death. So next, this is like so Catholic that I was actually kind of shocked, especially coming from its predecessors, which, you know, had the spirit channeling technique that is like one of the main downfalls of the series, and that's the Dark Age of the Law in Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destiny. So I made an entire video covering this, so I won't go too in-depth here to avoid boring you. But suffice to say that it's a society where the end justifies the means is actually a slogan taught in law school, that a lawyer or a prosecutor has to do whatever it takes to get their verdict. And there's another professor that argues against that, and that professor ends up getting murdered in the third case. So essentially, it's word for word in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It says the end must never justify the means. And so therefore, this game is essentially promoting that mindset. Again, see my video on the topic. It's called Dual Destinies Catholic Review, where I go really in depth on this. And finally, number 1, which is so explicit they even have promotional art to prove it, and that is the Sanctuary in The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Oh my goodness, Nintendo of America is notorious for censoring religion out of their video games. I mean, have you ever played Animal Crossing, for instance? Even though they celebrate Christmas, they still insist on calling every piece of furniture that's Christmas-related festive. A Link to the Past was no exception. In fact, the working title of A Link to the Past was Triforce of the Gods. But Nintendo apparently thought that was too religious, and so they changed it to A Link to the Past for American audiences. In addition, early promotional artwork for the game, in fact I'll have that as the cover of this video, is of Link kneeling in a Catholic church in front of a crucifix. Particularly because the ending of A Link to the Past involves Link being able to talk to the gods. In addition, the Book of Medora that you can use to translate ancient writings is known as the Bible in Japan. And the very sanctuary in which Link is praying in the Japanese version, is referred to as the church. And the minister that keeps Zelda safe from Ganon's persecution is called the priest in the Japanese version as well. In addition, if you look very carefully at the artwork for early Zelda games, and I believe A Link to the Past too, you'll actually find that there's a cross on Link's shield, and you can actually get a cross as an item in Zelda 2. In addition, Link can even find a church in one of the towns, although that's not one of the Zelda games I've played the most, because it's by far the worst in my opinion, so unfortunately it couldn't make this list because it's just, you know, the 8-bit era wasn't exactly the best at conveying religion. Anyway, so this video will go a little over 15 minutes. I apologize for that, but I hope you enjoyed these unintentional, maybe, Catholic teachings in Nintendo video games. If I have missed any, please do not hesitate to let me know, and thank you again for listening to one of my top 10s, and until I publish my next video, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.